All right, it is Siege Rework Monday, I guess, and Creative Assembly has dropped both the Siege Rework trailer and the blog post, both of which going into a lot of detail on some of the things coming in Total War Warhammer 3's new sieges. Now, there is a lot of information to go over today, so we have quite a bit to jump into, but in my typical fashion of upfronting as much of the knowledge as I can, let me give you kind of a breakdown of what is going on in this Siege Rework. Now, everything in the Siege Rework, for the most part, should feel, well, let me just say this. When you jump into Total War Warhammer 3, it seems to be that sieges should look and feel very familiar, which is good, right? You want to play the same game you've been playing for the last 6 years, right? You want it to feel like, hey, okay, I at least know what's going on. I don't need to relearn a whole new skill set, but they've added in quite a lot. So for one, sieges themselves now have multi-tiers, so it looks like across a lot of the different maps, you've got like bridge overpasses on top of a street that you can then place gunners on top of. Just more verticality in all of the siege maps aside from just the wall. It's not just one wall, then flat city. It's a wall, then you've got roads that then will dip down under these overpasses over these second tiers of another city portion where you can have gunners in place, like they can actually dock that portion of the wall. Same thing with siege emplacement. You cannot put siege engines on the wall itself, but it seems that you can put them on enough things around or close to the wall on a second level. They can shoot over the wall very sufficiently. In addition to that, too, with the survival battles, we got the ability to place monuments, traps, walls, barricades, everything like that. That has made its way into these new sieges, where you also have a currency called supply that you will then use to construct one of 4 of these items if you are the defender. Also, too, you have multiple points of entry into the walls themselves. It's not just one wall across one side of the map. It might be one wall across one side of the map, but it's spread out. It's not just simply like a straight line. It's not just simply a square. It has a more dynamic look to it. So very exciting stuff to kind of jump into here today. So that's just kind of the down and dirty breakdown of the Siege Rework. There's so much more that we're going to jump into right now, but I wanted to give you at least a kind of a crash course in what we're about to get into. So if that's all you wanted to know, feel free to shut the video down. But before you do, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. I can't tell you how much that helps. It's stupid how much it helps. And on top of it too, if you have not yet pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 3, you can do so using the link to my Nexus Store in the description and the pinned comment. This way you can get a key directly from the developer. That's how Nexus gets them. And then it's a great way to support the channel. Well, let's get started here on all of the Siege Rework information from Creative Assembly. And the way we're going to do this is I'm just going to press play, and we'll let this kind of do its thing, and I'll kind of stop and talk about certain spots here and there. A lot of this is going to be brought into more light once we take a look. Actually, I'm going to turn this down a little bit more. Once we take a look at the blog post. But here we go. Here we have the sieges, and you can already kind of see, right? This is an actual siege map. So you get that there is a lot of grandioseness going on. This is a lot larger of a map. This is a lot larger of a landscape that you're jumping into. There's more dynamic terrain, so there's a lot going on. And when we get into the blog post too, it talks about how each siege map is culturally different, which is very exciting. It's not just the same thing over and over. So let's take a look here a little bit while I catch my breath. Oh. So again, you can already see how massive some of these maps are going to be. We're going to go into a little discussion too about the Great Bastion at the very end of the article. But here is pretty much all of the glory. We're going to skip forward just a little bit here. And you can. One thing too I want to mention is that the walls themselves seem to be much wider, which is cool, right? It allows you to defend and fight better on the walls. The defensive points on the walls themselves, like these towers, they'll activate without having to have so many units close to them, and you have a wider activation range. So it's nice that these things get turned on a little bit easier. See, like look how big this wall is. It is huge. You know, in Total War Warhammer 2, you pretty much had enough for 2 units breadth. Looks like you've got 2, if not 3, like 2.5 or 3, because it's quite a big little extra portion right here. So it's nice to see that, a nice little addition to the game. Look at these guys. Look at these little pink horrors. He's getting scorched over there. The blue horrors are so cute. Adopt your blue horror today. But you can see too how you've got the use of fortifications or portions of the map that you can then shoot off into the enemy, right? You do have summonable ladders, it looks like, so that nothing changed or different there. But again, take a look at how wide that is. There's way more room to do things and way more room for activities. And one of the big things with sieges is that once the wall's been taken, you know, it's pretty much just hole up in the victory point location and kill things as they come in. Well, that's going to be different now. You've got barricades, traps, and towers that are going to act as a way to create killing fields, right? And take a look at that sweet little bit of Cathayan unit card, a nice Cathayan UI as well. But here is a nice layout of the map. And these locations, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of these supply points, as well as these 2 other locations. One is called a key location, which I believe is this one, and this one is the victory location. The key location provides defensive bonuses. So you get a lot of information by just taking a look at this picture, right? You can see these defensible locations. You can see where you can create towers right here. I don't know what that one is. Just that circle. I wonder what that is. That's something. Maybe it's this. It's just you have to be closer in range, whatever it is. And this looks also like the ability to keep the gates under your command. I do apologize too, guys. My allergies are kicking my ass today. So yeah, maybe these are these same construction points just further back. So they kind of try to do it to reduce AI or UI clutter, which I'm cool with, right? Otherwise, that'd be a lot of icons that I can't benefit from just yet in my face. As this kind of progresses a little bit further, should get some more action. So let's jump forward a little bit here. Aha, that's what I want to look at. So in the survival battle, we had all of these points, right? The survival one in the realm of corn, and each one of them provided different bonuses. And you can see right here, here's the key point, the key building. Gives a map-wide bonus of 15% melee defense and 10 leadership. And if we kind of skirt back a little bit, it's funny how I just moved forward from this very location. Minor supply point. So you can see that it's got 2 towers and 3 barricades that this supply point has direct access to. So you can see exactly how this all links together by hovering over each one of these, just like in the that conquest battle, right? The survival battle. And you can see they can kind of be in place. So it looks like they can't be attacked directly unless it's by ranged or by flying units. But I can't remember if in the actual conquest battle, if they could even be attacked. I can't recall. So again, you can kind of see how these things will be. You can construct them and deconstruct them again, just like a survival battle, allowing you to salvage some of those resources, which you'll then use to create new defenses. And I like this too because it does create that layered level of defense without having to mount another set of walls. And that's the kind of, it's like, yeah, I would love to see an outer wall and an inner keep, and the inner keep being defensible with those walls and stuff like that. But I feel like, we'll talk about that in a second. I feel like with that action, you kind of get to a point where it becomes kind of cumbersome, right? You're now disembarking from these walls, going over these, mounting these walls. That's a lot of time you're losing for enemies to start running towards you. They're probably going to be a quarter of the way there by the time you maybe get your units onto the wall, and you're going to start retreating them maybe when they're 3/4 of the way, or they start mounting the wall. So I'm cool more with, hey, let's have choke points, let's have verticality, and having me have the ability to shoot down into enemies that are trying to push towards key locations versus onions of walls that I have got to mount and dismount, because there has to be a playability to it, right? It can't be me just playing wall jumping simulator and having it be okay. So I do like this. This verticality does kind of create the illusion of another set of walls, which I'm cool with. And the fact that it's dockable like this makes it way better. And you can also dock some of the other things here, like the platform barricade. You can actually just cycle back right into that. We can probably see exactly what those stats are. Using the power of today's technology, we can go backwards in time. There we go. So this is just like the one from the survival battle. It gave us 20% range by mounting the platform barricade. So they did say that these are all different in sieges versus survival battles for balance purposes. And that makes sense to me. And it's looking like the actual debuffs are less, and the buffs themselves seems to be the same. So from what I've just kind of seen from looking at this and comparing my old notes. So again, overall, Siege Rework, exciting. I will say that I kind of wish that while this is going through the overview of everything we just talked about, I do kind of wish that there is the ability to put your siege engines on the wall. I think we all want that, but look, oh, you guys see Kairos right there? Was that Kairos? Or is that just a nondescript greater demon? Either way, look at him swooping up there with his little phantasmic wings. But a lot of really fun, cool conventions coming, and nothing too surprising though, right? We've already seen this in the survival battle. We're putting it into the siege engine, and that's exciting and that's fun, and it's, again, recognizable and easy. Nothing's going to be crazy here. It's basically like the fort system that we got from the Empire rework brought into the game as a whole across all of the siege maps. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. When I first watched this video, I was a little underwhelmed. I was like, well, it's cool to see all these things, but it feels like there's not a whole lot that's been brought in. And it really took me reading the blog post to understand that there is way more being added, and it's not just simply like, oh, here's an overpass, have at it, thank you, here's your Siege Rework. There's a lot more to this. Pivoting here into this action, we have got the actual blog on the rework. And this is what goes into a lot of the different things that are going to be coming. So the big thing here is the map design itself. So here it says, there's now a much wider selection of potential siege maps, each assigned to a settlement based on their default faction's culture, themes, and preferences for combat. Oh my god, I almost threw up on myself. Cathay and dwarfs build highly defensible fortresses set into the sides of mountains where their firepower can be exploited to its fullest. Meanwhile, Kislev has long withstood chaos with tight streets and hardy men and women who will fight tooth and claw for every inch. Races like Skaven and Greenskins have more ramshackle fortresses that are no less deadly, which themselves pale in comparison to the weirdness of the strongholds dedicated to each chaos god on the outskirts of the realm of chaos. So, lot to unpack there. For one, we get cultural differences per siege map, which is cool, right? So it seems like Kislev has tighter streets, really hard avenues that they're going to use that press of numbers, or those their hearty men, as it were, to defend these locations. Versus, okay, you're going to have a lot of crisscrossing enfilades in a Cathayan or dwarf siege map. Or if you look at Skaven and Greenskin, maybe there's going to be more stuff with traps and other kind of ramshackle stuff that denotes that there's just like a craziness to the Skaven and Greenskins' ingenuity. But look at the Chaos Gods. It says defending strongholds on the outskirts of the realm of chaos. So maybe this tells us that we will actually be going to a physical different map in the realm of chaos where there are strongholds that will be sieged against chaos in, right? And as thus, it doesn't say that chaos has the ability to own settlements or castles or, major settlements or minor settlements in the world itself, the old, new, and Darklands, all that action. So I'm wondering if that'll also pass into the other campaign map. Like if it's going to be two different campaign maps, whatever it is. But moving on, the layout of the settlement is going to make it a unique experience across many hours of play. So this really makes it so that anytime you jump into a siege, it is going to be different. Like it says right here, we've deliberately paced the layouts of different settlements to avoid repeats between adjacent regions, and even factions that share layouts have different dressings that can impact gameplay as well as looks. Fighting two identical siege battles back to back should be a thing of the past, which is very exciting to hear because that was not the case for quite a long time. So that is cool. Now the maps themselves though have been designed completely different. So as well as the capture points and buildable towers and barricades, which we'll get into below, we've upgraded our tools, AI, and design to make for much better maps. One significant area is height variation, like we talked about before, with much larger differences between elevation levels throughout a map, and it being far more common than before. Also dockable terrain, which we took a look at, which is really cool. They've added bridges to the maps, which we took a look at too. Also really awesome. I like this ability to basically just shoot down into a whole street and kill things with either artillery or with my range units. More open areas, which is really solid. I mean, one of the nice things is looking at some of the older games like Total War Rome 2 or Medieval and whatnot, is kind of seeing these tight avenues reaching into these wide open like little marketplaces and stuff like that, these open areas that allow you to do a lot more. So I like that because it allows you to have different units fighting, right? It's not just simply, okay, I'm going to take my infantry and I'm going to plug up this street and hope for the best. oh, I've got open area now. I can use cavalry to charge into this location or wrap around things, whatever it is. So I like the open areas thing here. Also, too, we get this. A fight no longer starts and ends at the outer wall, of which many settlements now have several, making for 2 or 3 approach angles for attackers. Great to hear. Also, too, it makes defensive siege weapons a far more promising prospect, be they firing from high ground inside of a settlement past the outer walls or defending the streets themselves with clever placement. So here is one of the maps. And this looks very reminiscent to one of the new Empire Fort maps. Not exactly the same thing, but you can tell it's got that same level of, hey, this is a raised area, and then this is a raised area, and you've got a lot of avenues in here, right? Got the gate on the right, the gate on the left, the gate on the bottom, and then these two right here. So there's far more ways to break into this, and which we'll see in a little bit. You can actually break the walls down. It seems like if you have the siege breaker ability, you can break the walls down, which is pretty interesting here, right? But all this, of course, shows us stuff like the locations and such, because we have supplies and buildable structures. They feature several capturable locations rather than one, and also towers and barricades, right? All the stuff that we've seen so far in the video is just kind of being reinforced and kind of fleshed out a little bit better in the blog, right? But like I was saying, units can now attack walls directly as they can gates. So like I said, I think that that means that the siege attacker ability will apply to walls and gates, which is pretty sweet. Just to see some sort of massive beast bludgeoning its way through a wall will be pretty sick. Also, the notion of just kind of creating a Helm's Deep after the walls fall. So custom made secondary line with barricades, towers, firing platforms, and monuments where you want them. And I love that prospect of saying, hey, you know, this wall's fallen. Let's create another line here, and we'll have things on top over here firing down and in, just firing all different locations. We got stuff back here shooting down, maybe if it's artillery pieces, whatever it is. So I do love this prospect of being able to create on the fly and adaptably, right? Because you can deconstruct and reconstruct these barricades and towers wherever you want on a moment's notice. It does take time to deconstruct and reconstruct, but we're talking about handfuls of seconds. I think it's like 5 or 10 seconds to deconstruct and reconstruct. I can't remember from the siege or the survival battle, but it's not enough where you go, oh, come on, finish. It's enough that you go, okay, that's out of the way. Now it's over here. Cool, done. Time to be defensive. So it's a nice, cool, concise movement. In addition to here, we've got buildings and level of settlement being the most, I'm sorry. This is the campaign portion I want to talk about. Well, I was going to say how important this would be on the campaign map. So in campaign, this is determined by various factors. This is referring to the stockpile of supplies. Buildings and level of settlement being the most notable, as well as scaling into late game for the more major double full stack encounters that occur at that stage. This allows you to construct a few important towers and barricades to begin with, already garrisoning them with troops or using them as tactical choke points. So the cool thing here is, like I said, when this gets to a higher level settlement, you'll start out with a reserve of supplies that you can then apply to these locations right at the start of battle in your battle placement phase, rather than having to, well, I assume battle placement phase. Maybe it's actually you have to press start battle for you to be able to do it. But the alternative would be waiting for you to accrue those supply points from the points that you capture, that you already own, so that your assaulter, your sieger gets, I guess, a little bit of a leg up in trying to break in before you have a chance to truly assemble anything, because you don't have the supplies to do it, which will come into play when we talk about minor settlements. So a little bit less hectic, a little bit more of a focused defense, but it does make for a really fun looking siege. But in general, the new maps are much larger with many more potential points of entry for your foe. So all these additional resources are going to be needed to keep things in check, which I like. But attackers cannot construct buildings or use supplies, in case you were wondering, nor do supply locations provide victory points, but denying you them allows for more ways to move you through your settlement. And moving on to the key buildings here, which we took a look at in the video, you've got one key building and one victory location. And the key building provides a defensive buff, which we looked at was a 15% melee defense buff as well as 10 leadership. Now that might scale, right? That I think it just literally told us it scales right up here, right? But that in and of itself will probably scale with things like, okay, hey, if you have this structure in town, like a garrison building, it maybe provides a better defensive buff, or maybe your certain level of what's it called? Settlement building, like the ultimate one, that one's in control of everything, like the Capitol building, that the rank on that might also dictate the defensive buff. We're not really sure, of course, but I would assume that has some sort of bearance on it. But also we have the victory point, which is just like it's been in previous iterations of Total War, that point in which kind of helps tick away the victory tickets for the besieged if you take it as the sieger. But again, overall, new and larger map layouts with better terrain, cultural differences between factions being represented, plus the new home turf advantage of towers and key buildings, all combines for a new experience. But all this is really stuffed in with a whole improved AI, according to Creative Assembly. So it makes it so that a lot of the elements of the army, they just attack a little bit better or deal with issues better. So flyers and fast-moving units will now prioritize useful actions like preventing sallied out cavalry from attacking ranged or sieging units. The AI also has a greater understanding of how different areas of the map are under threat and when they should withdraw to prevent losses. So they've taken a lot of notes from Three Kingdoms and Troy, they said, and they've done it to basically kind of make for a better AI, a better siege enjoyment. So if you have played Three Kingdoms, I think the sieges will feel very familiar, right? It seems, especially when it comes to minor settlement battles. And this looks like a little less of an important city, right? So you can see the layering here. You've got a very easy surroundable location, right? You got four walls that four gates that you can take advantage of. And I believe that this is maybe against the edge of a map. I'm not really sure, but I'm curious to see if we'll see any 360-degree sieges like we saw in Troy. And it seems like they've taken a lot of design elements from Troy and 3K, like they've outright said, so I wouldn't be surprised. But James Martin, the guy who kind of helped create these survival battles, has a big old chunk right here to say. And he said, we started with the 3K AI as it provided us with a good base to work from. The 3K settlement AI had been very well received and worked well for our new settlement layouts. From there, we put a lot of work into how we author our Siege AI graph to make it easier to design and more flexible to work with, which also improved the pathfinding within settlements. With the introduction of the districts concept via the capture locations and supply points, the AI can now separate and manage large parts of the settlement map and say this area over that area, this district is more threatened than that one. They then can prioritize or fall back if one is overtaken by the attacker. For the settlement battles, they also know how to build towers and barricades, which is something they don't have to do in survival battles. So very interesting indeed. Makes for attacking and defending fun, right? When you're fighting against the AI, obviously fighting against the most deadly of prey, another human, is going to be very enjoyable, but they wanted to make it fun for those who just want to fight the AI. But that brings us into our minor settlement battles. And these will be markedly different, but similar enough to the sieges. So basically what they wanted to do was have a minor settlement battle that was a huge number of special maps for each minor settlement rather than using slightly modified land battle maps. And the point here is to make this feel like, yes, it is an important location to you as the besieged, but for the sieger, you kind of have an upper hand. You don't have walls to contend with. You can kind of rush them a little bit quicker, and it makes it for a much more hectic and frantic deployment and defensive stage as the besieged. So without a initial wall to act as a stopgap, it's much more frantic defense, which can shift and move at any time. You're likely to have time to build up a full stock of supplies while waiting for the enemy to get past your first line, so making sure your initial placements are up to snuff is vital. And I like that, right? It does make for minor settlement battles to become a lot more hectic and a lot less, okay, let me just fight this like I normally would because it's a land battle. So it's cool to see minor settlement battles coming in this way, and it borrows again like we've seen from previous Troy and 3K. Barricades are in position that prevent a deeper access to settlements, or at the very least demand that attackers take a more circuitous route. Circuit, but with a tuss at the end of it. But towers are on platforms that are out of reach for melee units. Only flyers and range units can target them. So like we talked about earlier, couldn't remember if it was flyers and range. It is indeed that can destroy those locations. But also, just like in Troy, flying units and summon units cannot capture points, and also smaller sieges over less massive settlements, but with all the same grit and determination from both sides to conquer that area. That's kind of the ethos behind minor settlements. So Overall, very exciting to hear about. Would love to see what that looks like as far as the overall layout. How big is it? How small is it? How many defensive points do I get access to? So on and so forth. So excited to see what that looks like when we finally get our hands on it. Lastly, here we have the Great Bastion. And there's not a lot of information here on the Great Bastion. This doesn't tell us a whole ton. It just says, hey, you got to defend it. But here is a nice little bit. So once on the battlefield, the Bastion is an incredibly defensible fortress, one single attackable wall with clear fallback points, rarely interspersed towards the center. Strong walls with powerful towers are followed by swaths of buildable locations and defensible positions. However, all this is needed as the forces that will come to take it are truly titanic. The Chaos Gods know the value of breaching the Great Bastion, the Great Bastion, not the Great Passion. The Great Bastion and their armies will flood from the realm of chaos if it is disturbed, but be that by you or another faction. So, Great Bastion wall is a mono wall siege for the most part, right? It's going to be a big wall in the front that you're defending, and that makes sense. I totally understand it. And at the very beginning of that video that we watched for the Siege Rework, they talked about the Snake Gate has fallen, and you're up to defending this gate and that gate. So maybe there's the same gate system like we had with Ulthuan across all of the Great Wall, and maybe Great Bastion, and maybe there's certain portions of it that play and feel different, just like the gate system. So I imagine this is, again, going to be that single wall. I don't think this is the Great Bastion. It doesn't look very Great Bastion-y because I want this wall to feel large. Like if it's just got a normal wall in the front and there's a gigantic wall behind it, it's like it kind of feels counterintuitive to me. It should feel like a giant wall in front of it with smaller walls behind it. So, and I wonder too how that's going to work. Are we going to be seeing a layer of walls behind that big Great Bastion wall and curtain or whatnot? And like I said before too, it is kind of worrisome about having multiple walls because it does become tedious. So I'm very interested to see what the Great Bastion actually looks like on the siege map. Is this the Great Bastion? I don't think I think it's Wei Yin from what they described in the video, right? So, or Wei Xin. So we don't really have an idea of how that Great Bastion looks on the siege map, and I am very eager to see what it does look like. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. If you have any questions, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. I don't know anything cool, so I'll answer whatever I can from some of the stuff I've seen. It definitely looks like we're going to be seeing some cool, fun gameplay with the Siege coming up here soon. So I'm very stoked to see that. We finally got a little bit of gameplay and idea of how the Siege Rework is going to change Total War Warhammer 3. And like I said too, I've said like 40 times. There's nothing crazy about this. There's nothing that's going to blow our minds, but it does seem like they've taken a lot of feedback from a lot of people saying, hey, this is a lot of the stuff that we wanted, and it's been imbued into the game. So I would like to see more of what this includes before making like a final judgment on it, because there are some things that I have some questions about. And once we finally get some gameplay, we can ask and answer those questions, hopefully at the same time. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.